This episode is supported by the Women's Health Clinic. At the Women's Health Clinic, you'll be seen by our accredited menopause specialists working to the latest international clinical guidance. We believe that knowledge is power. When you understand what is changing in your body and why, you can make decisions with clarity and confidence and feel back in control of your health. We really take the time to listen to your symptoms using evidence-based assessment and testing where appropriate, and explain what's happening in a way that actually makes sense. From there, we support women to explore all effective treatment options, including prescriptions when needed. Our aim is simple: to optimise women's healthcare wherever you are. No fannying around. Find out more at thewomenshealthclinic.eu.
We talk about how so many women live disconnected from their bodies for years, how we push through, ignore the signs, blame ourselves, try the fasting, the supplements, the gym, the next thing, the better thing, without ever really stopping to ask, what does my body actually need? Marina's story is about learning to listen, not in a fluffy light a candle and buy a journal way, although crack on if that's your thing, but in real, honest, sometimes an uncomfortable way. It's about nourishment over punishment, curiosity over shame, and realising that midlife might be the point where your body finally says, right, are you listening now? Right then, let's fanny around with Marina.
Hello. Heads up, Katy Pitt-Allen joined the podcast.
I'm there. I'm coming. I'm here. I've just been in my little box for about 2 hours, so I feel like slightly...
So Katy used to have really bad problems with her mic and her sound, so now she has to go and sit in is effectively like a giant shoebox, don't you?
It's not even giant. It's like a tiny miniature matchbox is where I'm sitting.
Marina, tell us a little bit about you then, and when we put the fannying around bat signal out and said, come and speak to us, ladies, share your stories. What made you think, yes, I'm going to join those two maniacs and talk about myself for an hour?
Well, firstly, I love talking about myself. I think I was just really drawn to the topic. And I've had some insights into my own body and into my own relationship to my own body. And I thought that maybe discussing it here might be helpful. But also, it's really funny, as I was saying, I've just joined a nutrition program and I'm now on it for the next 6 weeks with these two amazing women who are, one of them is a hormone expert and the other one is a nutritionist, and they're both really buff and really lean, and one of them was an athlete, a tennis pro, and the other, I mean, they're just, yeah, any kind of Facebook reel, they're at the gym pulling weights. And so one of the things that I started to notice last year, actually, I think, was that while I went to the gym and I wanted to get strong, I kept putting the weight on. So it was really fascinating to me. I was like, well, this is really interesting. What's going on? That this is new for me. So if I do exercise, then, the weight would drop off and everything. But it kept going up. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And so I'd been in and out of doing all sorts of other things, such as fasting and just wanting to understand, I know, and just wanting to understand how it worked. And of course, I have a tendency to, when I'm drawn to something, to get really, really, really obsessed by it for a while. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done with that. I'm on to something else that I'll get really obsessed by. And so I started just exploring this whole domain of autophagy and ketones and ketosis and just exploring what it would feel like if I did these things. And so, for a while it felt great. However, what I've come to realize is that actually, while I was doing all of this, it was adding a lot more stress to my body. So I only have come to this conclusion quite recently. But what I've realized is that when we're looking for answers, that journey that we go on actually can be really beneficial, because it's part of this, not this, but this, not that, but maybe this. And that's really helpful, I believe, as somebody that only really learns by doing and experiencing, not just by reading a book. I find reading books really difficult in terms of assimilating knowledge. Like, I'm not the type of person that can read a book and then go and do the thing and understand it. I'm much better at give me the experience so that I can embody that, learn from it, and then kind of come out of that experience going, well, this is actually what I've learned. This has been my experience and actually doesn't work for me. Or it did work for me, ultimately. But what I've come to also realize is that when you're in the quandary, when you're in the reflection, when you're in the, I wonder what, I wonder if, I wonder how, in the curiosity of it all, it makes this journey so much easier. Because I know that when we don't understand generally as women, what we tend to do is blame ourselves. We tend to worry, we tend to blame, we tend to shame, we tend to, do all the things. And so that doesn't actually makes it worse, right? But I've now landed on something that made total sense to me, which is sustainability and nourishment. And going, well, what feels good to my body? I mean, starving myself really actually started not to feel great.
I just wanted to talk about your relationship with your body and what that's been like over the years, starting from a young woman to now. And you've spoken there about weight loss and weight gain and being happy in yourself. Just talk us through a little bit about your experience so far.
So, gosh, it wasn't until I was about 35 that my relationship with my body started to change. And first of all, let's talk about environment, because my mother was a ballet dancer. So, for those of you that don't know what how ballet dancers relate to their bodies, they're really strict. And even though she stopped dancing when she was about 21, 22, because she had my two sisters, the way she lived her life was very much on that same trajectory. So she would restrict what she ate enormously. And that's kind of environment I was brought up in.
I imagine that was very challenging as a young woman.
Well, it was normal for me, but I had a big appetite. So I loved food, right? And so I see my mother, and she'd be eating this cottage cheese and a little bit of brown at lunchtime, and then not much at dinner. And I was like, oh, I suppose that's what I'm meant to be doing then. I was at boarding school for most of my young life anyway, so we were given all sorts of things. And but I didn't really notice that I had a weird relationship with food until I hit puberty. So, but that was really more about my confidence and basically not having any whatsoever in the least. I hit 13, 14, and I don't know, there was a switch. It was weird. It was like, I never really thought about my body. I never really thought about what it looked like. I never really thought about what I looked like. And I hit 13, 14 and suddenly became, oh my God, super self-conscious. Mm-hmm. And I think I just went into massive depression, actually. But I didn't talk to anybody about it. I started having suicidal thoughts. Everything was really black.
Right.
And unbeknownst to me at that point, I made a decision. But unbeknownst to me, and I'll tell you in a sec, the decision that I made back then, without me knowing it, actually saved my life. So that decision back then was to basically go, I feel so unlovable. Oh, I guess the only way to actually feel lovable or that somebody would love me is to look thin. So that was the start. And so I stopped eating. I started, and I drank very heavily. Um, and by about the about the age of 18, I was about 7.5 stone, of 7 stone or something like that. I'm now at around 10, and I'm a good weight. But back then, I wasn't eating. My hair was falling out, and I was drinking. And that brought on a whole barrage of other experiences. I lost my virginity to a guy that didn't care. So I didn't really understand how these experiences were forming the way I viewed my body, because I didn't have the awareness that I do now. I didn't have the awareness that I did at the age of about 35, 36. And so what would happen is I would use alcohol to have sex. So I couldn't have it without it. And then, all of this was going on. All of this was going on. All of this was going on. Once again, I didn't really have the awareness. And it wasn't until I was about 35 that I kind of started to go on my own personal development journey. I got really interested in transformation. I decided that I wanted to invest time and energy in understanding why I felt the way I did about myself. And as I got more grounded, more clear, more sort of, as my head started to be less noisy, I realized things about the way I was being that were like, why the fuck would I be doing that? So what then occurred was that I realized that I would have sex drunk because I couldn't stand the sight of my own body when I was in bed with somebody else. I had so much noise about what I looked like, how I felt. I just wanted to be free. And when I had that insight, I realized that it all came back to what had happened back when I was about 16, 17 years old, when I lost my virginity, is that it didn't feel safe to have sex without actually without having alcohol. So it would, because the experience was so horrible, it felt like I can't do that way. It's too painful. So
Right.
the relationship I had with my body was I don't like my body very much, a rejection, if you will. And it wasn't until I actually got pregnant, it was 36, 37, that at that point I was like, well, I've got to look after my body. I've got a baby inside of me. Oh, so that was really the unraveling. So it wasn't until my late 30s that the sort of inquiry really started about what's going on with my body. And as such, I had a major epiphany, which was my anorexia kept me alive. Because while I was obsessing about not eating, I wasn't thinking about killing myself.
Because it gave you the control, Marina, right? It gave you
massive control. So it was almost like a safety. It was almost like, this way I can keep myself alive. I'm feeling safe. So it was a huge thing for me to have that realization. And after I had my son, I went into he didn't sleep for about 2 years. And I was so exhausted to the point where I would wake up, have energy for about 2 hours, and then need to go back to bed again. So I looked for somebody that could help me out with that, because I was like, this is not normal. And that's when the unraveling really started with my body, actually, because I started to kind of, we got everything back, and we realized I was completely depleted, but also I had all sorts of gut stuff going on. And at that point, it became, because I didn't want to have a look at it. It was almost like I knew that something was up. I didn't want to have a look at it. I didn't want to go in there. I didn't want to have to deal with my body. I didn't want to. And what was interesting about this all was that I must have spent so much time in my head, because ultimately, when you don't want to be in your body, when you don't have a great relationship with it, you tend to spend time up here.
Completely disconnected.
Yeah. So I didn't really have an understanding. I just felt really shit. So I just like, well, I better kind of look at that then. It was almost like to the point of whatever's going on with me, I need to have a look at this because it has to be better than me carrying on, ignoring it. And so that was when I started to actually get curious about, we unraveled this, I realized that actually it was an opportunity for me to get curious about my body. It was an opportunity for me to understand my body better. It was an opportunity for me to know and kind of start this journey of, how do I eat so that my body feels good? It stopped being a thing about losing weight, I guess, and became more of a thing about, how do I maintain a healthy body?
Sustenance.
Yeah, and I've been in and out of that reality for a while, by the way. It's not so clear cut. It wasn't like, oh, yes, and now this. There are old pieces of conditioning that would still linger.
So that's a long time to go without help, Marina, from the age of 18 to 35, did you say?
Yeah, but I
was
found
there
myself.
any point where you said, I mean, I'm not quite sure what your support network was like, your relationship with your siblings, your friends, your parents. That's a long time to exist like that without asking for help.
Well, I did actually. I did actually have help. But once again, it was all very psychological. It wasn't sort of body. And which obviously that they are connected, but it wasn't until I was about 31, 32 that I started to really delve into this whole transformational world.
And I think as well, also, that's very brave, because actually, when I speak to women who have previous experience of anorexia or bulimia, that real disconnect does exist. And I think that it then becomes very difficult to then talk about food in any way, shape or form, let alone, okay, so you have this thing that's your enemy, and how are we going to make it your friend? How are we going to make this work for you? And to tackle that head on, I think must have been a real challenge, Marina.
So what was interesting about this was that it wasn't like head on, actually. It was, as I worked in other parts of my life, I started to realize that, well, namely the relationships I had around me, and mainly relationship. And the thing is the only relationship we're ever in is the one with ourselves, right? So as I noticed that, and as I started to realize that, I'm like, I'm the only one in this relationship with myself. So if I want my relationships around me to change, I'm going to have to be the one to do that. And as I started doing that, I realized that I started to actually become more loving towards myself, and choosing different things. So I would do all sorts of drama. Like, I would just attract loads and loads of drama in my life, and over time I realized actually that it's not what I want. It's not good for me, let alone anybody else that I kind of am in the vicinity of. And so it wasn't a let me tackle my body. It was more of a, as I focused on other areas of my life, that sort of naturally kind of became part of my inquiry, as it were. Yeah.
And what would you say the relationship with your body is now, Marina?
Oh, it's so different.
Is it? In what way? Tell me.
So as I said, I've come to this point where I just want to nourish my body. I want to have energy, and I want to ensure that my body has everything that it needs for it to do the thing that it's really good at, which is to support me. And the thing I've noticed is that when I have really focused on that, what seems to emerge, because I think it's a bit like, my sense of this, by the way, is that our bodies want to support us. And it's so fucking intelligent. Like, we birth babies and the babies come out and they they grow inside of us, and we don't do any of that shit. It just does it. Or there's like this energy that does that for us, right? And I'm like, the intelligence in that. So
Well, just to jump in, because I spoke about so much in clinic today, and I feel like I say it sometimes, and in a very trite way. But just an example to what you're saying, Marina, is that estrogen actually supports every single regulatory process in our body. It is a super hormone, super anti-inflammatory. It is our superpower. And your body is so clever that when you don't have enough estrogen, then what will happen is your body will start metabolizing your testosterone and turning it into estrogen so it can continue to support the regulatory processes in your body. And that is I just think that that's pretty amazing.
It is, and it compensates. So I went back into exploring my body again. I went to a functional medicine lady because, once again, I was really tired, and I knew that I had started to have brain fog again, and I'm like, this isn't right actually for me. I was exhausted by 8 o'clock in the afternoon. I was like, oh my God, I can't keep my eyes open. So I was like, I've been here before. I need to go back and get checked. And I did. And I got the Dutch test and I got my hormones checked. And literally my day was like this: cortisol, right up, crash. That was it. That was basically what my body was up to. And so I realized that actually there were other things going on as well, like heavy metals, etc., and how the body stores the heavy metals because it doesn't feel safe enough to let it go when it's got a whole bunch of other things going on. And I was like, wow, it really knows what it's doing. And there we are going, oh, my body's shit. It's breaking down. It doesn't know what it's up to. And actually the opposite couldn't be true. Like, it's so not true. In fact, I would say, trust the body. The body knows. The body's in the present moment. The body actually does its thing. And as you say, like, it compensates when it doesn't have what it needs. And so it does all this weird stuff and you're like, it doesn't work. And you're like, well, actually, what does your body need? What's it asking of you? I think the thing that we've forgotten to do is to really listen, because nobody ever taught us that. Nobody has given us sovereignty to say, or any kind of agency to say, actually, the thing we're going to teach you is to listen. And this is how we're going to do it.
And I think as well, going back to how at the beginning of the conversation where you were saying that when you first started thinking about how to optimize your body, then you looked at autophagy and you looked at fasting. And I think that we overcomplicate these things because actually our body does that automatically. Unless you're eating every single second day, your body will do that automatically. If you go 12 hours without food, it knows how to work. And actually, I see so many confused women. And quite often, I saw a lady today, and she was saying that she'd just spent, hundreds of euros, on supplements. And she'd bought selenium, she'd bought a bit of this, she'd bought some ashwagandha, she'd bought hundreds of things. And she was literally just throwing everything at it. And it was when I stopped her and, what are we trying to achieve? So what are you hoping to achieve? And actually, she couldn't answer the question because it was just really confusing. And when you unpicked it, all she wanted to do was actually just to feel better. But when we looked at diet and simple things that we forget, then actually there were a lot of changes to be made there.
Yeah. And so one of the things that it's so interesting, right? I think you think you eat a certain way, you think it's healthy, you think it's this, you think it's that. And one of the insights I had yesterday actually around this is because I'm working with these two amazing women, as I already said, and one of the things they talk about is fat adaptation at the beginning. So to stabilize the sugar, because one of the things that I've realized about me is that I would have these crashes. So I was like, what the fuck is that about? And literally it is the sugar crash. It's like and so they just want you to stabilize for the first 2 weeks. And then they, it's not like you take carbs out completely for the rest of your life. It's just to adapt in that stage.
Well, and the reason also, and I'm just going to add, I'm going to add the scaffolding to what you've just said, because actually what we know is when we look at women, let's say over the age of 35, and we look at the role that your hormones play when we're looking at insulin resistance. So, in layman's terms, how does your body process glucose? Well, a lot differently than it did when you were 29. And it doesn't mean that you have to never eat sugar or carbs ever again, but you are always going to be on some kind of roller coaster unless you adapt your diet. And it doesn't have to be miserable and boring, but bread, pasta, potatoes, and rice probably aren't going to be your friend all day long, Monday to Friday. It's sabotage.
And so what's been fascinating is at this point in the process, what I've started to realize is that what I thought was too much food on my plate is actually exactly the right amount of food.
Of course.
But it's the right type of food. So like huge amount of green and then, X amount of protein and then X amount of fat for now. I mean, it will change. But what I realized was how distorted my reality of what too much food looked like, right? And what I thought was healthy over throwing a supplement at it versus actually getting the micronutrients in so that I can have that stability. And I cannot begin to tell you the difference that I'm on the second day, the difference that it's already making. I don't have any sugar cravings. I feel full. I feel nourished. And I feel clear in my head. But the other thing that I've also done is to stop alcohol. This has been a game changer.
I'm sure.
And I knew it would be. But it was a habit of a fucking lifetime. And it got to the point where I was so scared to not have it in my life, of what that would look like, as to how that would be, the types of whether I could ever go out again. I mean, all of this anxiety arose, but it was this moment where I'm done. I'm just done. So I stopped from the beginning of January. I've had maybe a couple of wines, but that's it. I don't drink in the same way as I used to. I don't have to go. I can go out and have a water. So what I've realized is that this entire sort of story and reality was just kind of, I was like, well, let me experiment. Let me get curious. Is it possible to do this? And what would it feel like? And then there was this moment when I realized I value my brain over the booze. It was almost like, what do I need to value more so that this changes? And I realized that I actually really value my brain. I really value having clarity. I really value having energy. I really value feeling good in my body. Because the interesting thing about this was I was trying to do that in the wrong way. By drinking booze, I'd have clarity. I wouldn't feel so tired. But it was this sort of like never-ending kind of sort of the dog trying to catch its tail, because you would feel it, but it was almost like fake. It's not sustainable.
And I think, I think when we look at perimenopause, menopause, hormone change, whatever you want to call it, a transitional period, although I don't particularly like that. But I think when we look at this time, then, it is an opportunity of all of these wonderful things that can happen. And yeah, it's a massive pain in the ass. And if you don't get it right, it's really easy to cock it up and you will spend 10, 15, 20 years feeling hideous. However, it doesn't have to be like that. And actually just listening to your body and because I really do feel, it gets to the point around this hormonal change where you really don't have a choice but to listen. You have no choice.
Your body is going, hello, 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 hello.
Engine light is on.
So Marina, you when we started the conversation, I asked about your relationship with your body. Let's fast forward now then. How old are you now, if you don't mind us asking?
I'm the young 50-year-old.
However old you want me to be.
Old enough to know better, young enough still not to care.
Something like that anyway.
But it's been a few years, shall we say, since your 30s, and it sounds like you've been on a really interesting journey. And I think we were speaking before Katy joined us about the thread that ties a lot of the podcast episodes together is this lack of information, and usually it's a lack of medical information. Your story is a little bit different, but again still comes down to this information and being informed about our bodies and how they work and what they do and what we can do to fuel them and help them. What's that relationship like now?
Well, it's a lot more intimate. So it's a lot more kind of, I love being with my body. So, whatever that looks like, going to the gym, going for a walk, what do I fancy to eat? I have conversations with it. Whereas before it was like, I have no body. It doesn't exist. Why do I feel so shit? And it gets a look in, I guess. It's a bit like, what would my body love to do today? How can I nourish it in the way that it would feel really good to me? I live in it, right? So
yeah,
I try and keep my house really clean and tidy, but then I'm trashing my body and it's like, what? Doesn't make any sense, right? So it's a bit like, how can I respect what I've been given? And so I just kind of became aware that I was just asking different questions about that. So my relationship to my body is a far better one, of course, then you can always go deeper. I'm not the type of person to spend hours having my skin routine, and it's just something I just don't do. But maybe that's the next invitation. But you're right, Katy. Like there comes a point when it's just like your body goes, look, I'm just so fucking bored of you not listening to me anymore. I'm gonna make you feel like really shit, so that you actually notice me.
Sure.
And so like you take care of me. Hello. And actually I see that as an incredible intelligence. It's like, I'm going to make you feel so shit that you have no choice but to go and get a little bit more informed or to do the thing. Yeah.
Do you know what's really cool about this, Marina, is that we kind of touched on the fact that the body is really clever and it does these things, to protect us and support us. And what is really, really cool about this stage of life is that it is actually a bona fide critical health window. And so what that means is, and this is, not according to me, this is clinical data that says that the things that you do or don't do in this period of perimenopause or menopause, early menopause, will shape your future health. So that is just really incredible, is that actually your body is not only putting the engine light on so you listen, but also the things that you do or the way that you listen have the power to shape what the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years look like.
And I love that. And I also love the fact that it's actually at the right time. So I could not have been in this place to do what I'm doing now in my early 30s. And I guess it's a bit like preparing to have a baby. if you prepare before you have the baby, you look after yourself, the kind of the whole experience is so much better. I certainly didn't. And my body was like, well, fuck you.
I think you get this renewed appreciation for your body, don't you? I mean, countless people I've spoken to who have had injuries. I had a trapped nerve in my neck, and I know a good friend of mine fell and did some really interesting fractures to her arm. And this, we just kept saying to people when we'd meet or with friends that we'd meet, oh, I just want to be better now. Like, and you forget what being well is like.
And I think that's it. Realizing that actually you're not going to be here forever. And I want to, I don't know, there's a part of me that, because I also, my mother ended up having something called cortical basal degeneration. And that hit her around 58, 59. She was diagnosed with it then. And it's a degenerative disease of the lower cortex. And I had to see her go through that and experience it and I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So that for me was very confronting. And it kind of woke me up to the fact that I'm not going to be here forever. But also, they don't know enough about it, but a lot of this is your body going, you need to listen to me because ultimately you need to be changing the way that you're doing things, whatever. And she was under a lot of stress for a lot of years. And so that really marked me. And so I hit 50 and I'm like, my commitment right now is really just to listen and respect what my body needs. And I want to feel alive. I want to feel good and I want to feel energized. So in order for that to be the case, if that is really my soul's desire, then I've got to align my lifestyle to that. And yeah, is it a pain in the ass? Well, sometimes it is, because you've got to change shit up and you're like, oh no, I have to now eat that thing. Or, I'm going to get up, and it's just changing small things that can make a really, really big difference. And, but once again, as you said, it gets to the point where you just like, you feel like it's a non-choice. It's non-choice. Non-choice.
There's no choice. No choice. And I meet lots of women who have made really positive choices. And then I meet lots of women who have literally been banging their head against a wall for about 15 years. And they are tired, they are inflamed, they are sad, they are sore, all of these things. And I feel like a bloody broken record, but you just think, actually, if you were given the information or just an insight into how your body was going to change and the fact that what it requires will be different, would you have spent the last 15 years or the last 10 years or 8 years, just literally doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different outcome? Because I don't think so. I don't think women are stupid. I think we're incredibly resilient, but I think may that be our greatest strength and weakness, actually.
Anybody that goes to your practice is very lucky to have you, because I think there's a lot of information out there now, but it can be very confusing because it can be very contradictory. But also, once again, it's a bit like when we know what's going on, we can then stop blaming ourselves.
Absolutely.
And so the work I do with women is it doesn't matter what work we do, right? It all comes back to the same thing, which is if we don't understand what's going on, blame ourselves.
And I have to be careful, but again, last week there was a lady and she was a young lady, and she was sat opposite me saying, I think she was so apologetic. I think I'm a bit more anxious and I'm not quite sleeping, and I feel like my body's changing. And her husband came in with her, And her husband was, as quick as she was opening her mouth, he was then saying, but do you not think it's got more to do with the fact that you're drinking lots of wine on the weekend? And she said, well, I don't know. Maybe. Oh, yeah, no. Okay. Well, I think probably I'll just go home and just take my supplements. And it took everything that I had not to jump off of my chair, launch myself across the desk and throttle this man. But I was very professional, because actually this was like a window into what happens to women, every woman in the world, because that's an insight into her own brain. Because what questions do we ask ourselves? Are these changes really happening to my body, or am I just imagining it? And shall I just carry on and, not acknowledge the changes to myself or to anyone else? And that's where we come unstuck, not because we're stupid.
No, and I think it's a big identity shift too. So, but it's not marked. And I deal with this with women all the time, because when I work with women who inherit wealth, and suddenly they land this thing, right? And they're like, but I wasn't prepared for this. Now what? And so this is exactly the same. It's like when there's no mark, when it's not marked, when we don't know what to expect, it becomes this, I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know how to get from A to B. If I don't know I'm in Birmingham, how am I supposed to get to London? But nobody's told me that I'm supposed to go from A to B. And so when we understand what we're dealing with, we can then make the changes in a way that feel really good to us. But until that point, we're throwing things, and what you were saying is like, we don't know, or it's out of our purview. We don't kind of see it because it's something we've always done. So it can't be that then.
Exactly. And I think there's so many, like you said about fasting, which is just horrendous. We could do a whole new podcast about fasting. But, fasting and women that say, oh, no, breakfast, I don't eat breakfast, never eaten breakfast. And all of these things, like, how are you supposed to follow the rules when you don't know what they are?
Right.
And, your body changes, and it changes so, so insidiously that I think a lot of women don't understand that it's about just refreshing what you thought you knew about your body.
I think a lot of ladies feel silly as well, because we're asking for the answers because the information isn't out there.
Yeah.
And we've spoken, you've got to ask because it's not there, or it's unclear what is the correct answer, or, at least... So you almost go with this, I feel a bit silly, but it could just be that actually it's me being silly. And it's that kind of attitude. And if you've got someone fueling that, a husband or a friend or whoever, you're going to go on feeling like that until feeling silly and just, plodding on, I guess.
Yeah. And I think also the further you get away from yourself, the harder it is to come back. And I think that, like you did, Marina, I think that actually, thank God that in your late 30s, you had a baby and you were, forced to really make these changes. And I think that's a really good time to do that, because the amount of women that I meet that are in their 50s and their 60s, and as I said, have, only got the memo a little bit too late. And not that 50 or 60 or 70, and I started a lady who was 79 on HRT the other day, and, not that these times are too late, but they are in terms of time that you've lost and time that you have spent not feeling yourself.
And I think, understanding what you're going through, it makes it so much easier for everybody. You're able to express that to everybody else around you. As you said, I get mad at a banana. Well, yeah, I don't put up with that much shit anymore, actually. And I find myself getting so fucking angry over the smallest thing. And I told my partner the other day, because there was this thing that I saw, which was amazing, actually, the woman's brain and how it changes in menopause.
Yeah, by Lisa Mosconi.
Yeah, and so, before menopause, it's like everything's across the logic and the emotional, and then you've got the man's brain, which is basically it stays in one compartment, one side or the other side. I was like, wow. And then it has
Still primates, that's why.
Yeah, I think, yeah. And then I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. And then as we get older, the menopause hits, it's like the lines don't cross so much anymore. So we start becoming more about me. What do I want? How do I fit in this? This is actually something that's biological, right? And so I said to my partner, so I'm obviously in my moving towards man era. I can be a little bit more selfish about this now. I want to go and do this. Bye. And so it's almost like a permission slip to go, actually, this is what my body needs. It's biological.
Mhm.
It's what's being asked for this. And I'm going to go and do that. And maybe that's part of it, which is, if we've been so fucking conditioned to look out for everybody else. And so it's always out there. What do you want? What do you need? How are you? What are you up to? Out there. But it's not coming back to you, which ultimately, it looked to me like our brains change and says, come back to you. And what do you want? And
Otherwise, load.
Well,
and I'll make you get all your words.
Well, yeah, and he might get out an AK-47 and shoot everybody. I mean, I don't know. It's a bit like when I get that way, when I get so triggered and I get so angry, it's usually because I'm tired. My body's just going, I think we just need to take it down a notch. Just go and breathe. Go and stand in a wood.
With no people.
Yeah.
Marina, I think I know the answer to this question, but it's a question we ask everybody that comes on the podcast towards the end of their episode. If you could have a chat with a young Marina, an 18-year-old Marina, and give her a few pearls of wisdom, what would you tell her?
Oh, that's quite an emotional question. Just let me sit with that for a second. I've got all the goosebumps going on, and I've got quite a lot of emotion coming through my body at the moment. Let me just whoa.
Take your time.
I think I would say to her that she has everything that she needs. And the most important piece of this all is to, when she feels, that journey that she was on, it works out okay in the end. And actually, it's okay to feel the way that she did. And it's all part of this rich tapestry. Everything that's happened up until this point, up in my life, that was dictated by her a lot of the time, has brought so much wisdom and understanding. It's a bit like the shadows that we don't want to go into are where the gold bleeds out. It's like the wisdom in the wound, and I'm so grateful to her because of her teenage rebelness, her feistiness, her angst, her depth, her all of the places that she went to, have given me such insight into the breadth and width of what's the richness of life and being human, and allows me now to really kind of hold space for women go through the stuff that they go through. So I'm really grateful to her, actually. So I just really wanted to say thank you.
Brilliant. That feels like the perfect place to end. Thank you so much for your time today, Marina. It's been fascinating talking to you.
Yeah, it's been really wonderful, actually. Thank you.
Such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for your time.
This episode of Fannying Around is supported by Clear Boost, a women's health supplement range I created after years of working in clinic and seeing how confused and overwhelmed women felt by supplements. Each product is designed to support the symptoms that I see most often: hormone changes, low energy, poor sleep, low mood, and stress, using ingredients chosen for their specific roles in hormone regulation, energy production, and nervous system support. The idea was to replace long random supplement lists with a small number of targeted formulas so women know what they're taking and why. Find out more at clearboost.eu.
Oh, Marina, that was wonderful, wasn't it?
Do you know what I really valued, Rosie? I really valued her honesty. And I think that, we're so lucky when we talk to women on this show that I think people are honest. But I wonder if, with Marina, it felt like such an area of vulnerability, didn't it?
Sure, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And just, we always ask people before they come on, is there anywhere you don't want to go? And Marina was like, no, absolutely fine. But I could feel her reliving some of that past and that trauma, especially from when she was a teenager. And it was really evident at the end of the podcast when we asked her that question. That was a really hard, and I've actually felt quite emotional when that was a really hard thing for her to do, wasn't it?
I think really when I feel like a lot of Marina's story was about pausing, and I was actually just about to say, quite a lot of the time, if you say, what would you tell your future self? I would probably just whittle off some answer.
Yeah.
I probably hadn't given much thought to. And I think that it's about pausing. And I love the fact that Marina did that. She took that pause to really connect with that question. And I felt like that was the theme that ran through everything that she said. It was really a story of reconnection, of pausing, and of listening to your body. And I think that is something that certainly I do not do those things.
We rush. I don't know about you, but from the moment I wake up, I don't even have children. I rush through life. I rush through the day. and Bobby was actually taking the mickey out of me tonight because I sighed and went in the kitchen and said, oh, I just don't know where the day goes. And he said, you sound like such a mum thing to say, but it's so true. We rush through life. We don't stop to pause, to listen, to appreciate things. Our bodies being one of those things,
Exactly. And I think, I really, and again, that's why I like this podcast, because I think, personally, as a medical professional, I love clear-cut answers. Like I love HRT, I love medicine, I love doctors, I love nurses, I love treating things, and I love problems that have lovely answers that we can all move on with. And I know that a lot of my practice is also empowering women about, diet, lifestyle, exercise, sleep, all of these wonderful things that are tools. And I think that it was really great to talk to Marina because she had really done a deep dive into those tools.
It's still doing it. Yeah, it's still on that journey completely.
And learning the hard way, like doing, every fad that, autophagy and fasting and whatever else comes up that you think might optimize and, inverted commas, optimize your health and your hormones and whatever else it is. But actually the moral of the story, I think, is just, stopping, listening, and sitting with the truth, sitting with your truth about how your body has changed and how to move forward.
And everybody's different, and that word sustainability came up, and doing something that feels good, that is right for you, that fits in with that rhythm of your body, that isn't going to sort of sway you from, a normal routine to something completely out, running 10 miles a morning and eating a Snickers, It's listening to your body and going, that feels right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for women, it takes time. I think, some women's bodies have been shouting at them for years, and some women are just really in tune to, oh, hang on, my body's changed and something feels uncomfortable. And none of it is right or wrong. But if anything, I hope that this podcast and women like Marina are, listened to, and actually encourages just even one person to listen to their body a little bit closer. We've succeeded, haven't we?
Fannying Around was brought to you by Everything's Rosie, presented by me, Rosie Frost, and Katy Pitt-Allen, and sponsored by Clear Boost Supplements and the Women's Health Clinic Europe.